Y'all, I am not happy. I just spent like 26 minutes going over bad times at the El Royale with my fucking computer, and YouTube, whatever, for whatever reason, only got out of that 26 minutes, 12 minutes and 47 seconds. So it skips back and forth, talks about this, talks about that, and you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? So I deleted that video, and now I have another one. This one. I'm not going to talk for hopefully 26 minutes. Let me just get right into it. This movie was Bill Kill esque, where it was split up into like different stories because you have four initial, or I'm sorry, five initial characters. You've got the honeymoon suite, which is the detective pretending to be a vacuum salesman. You've got room seven, which is Emily. She's got her sister tied up in her trunk because her sister got involved with a cult in California. I'll explain that later. You've got room five, which is a singer. She's trying to make it big, and she's fallen on hard times. Four, you've got ex bank robber who's come to the El Royale because his brother buried money there before he was killed. Five, you've got the bellhop bartender, the guy who works at the hotel, doing all this shady shit. But we'll get back to him later. So, shady guy works at the hotel. His name is Miles. Brother looking for buried money is in a disguise. He's dressed as a priest. He goes by Father Flynn. You've got the singer. Her name is Darlene. I already talked about Emily and her sister Rose, whatever. And then you've got the detective, and I never caught his name. If he said it real quick, and I didn't catch it. So the detective is that'll do. Let's talk about him first because when he was first introduced to the audience, he came across as snobbish, closet racist, and just like an asshole. You have the priest and Darlene who show up at the hotel around the same time, and the detective is already there. And so Darlene and the priest walk in, and out of nowhere, the detective starts shouting from underneath the bar that there's no one there to take care of him. He's pretending to be a vacuum salesman, talking about how dirty the place is, how he wanted some coffee, couldn't find any coffee, yada yada yada. And I personally think that he was looking for something else, but that's not what how the director chose to portray it, and I'm not sure why, because after finding out he was a detective, and when he first gets into his room, the honeymoon suite, which he was insistent upon getting simply because it was away from all the other rooms, he starts ripping that shit apart looking for wires, and he finds like 18 or something, and he realizes, yo, there's something up with this mirror. And so he goes out, he starts looking around, and he looks for the bellhop, the guy who works at the hotel, and he finds him passed out with a needle sticking in his arm, shooting up heroin. And so he takes the master key and starts walking around the fucking property and finds these back tunnels that go to each room. That each room actually has a two-way mirror or one-way mirror, whatever it's called. You can look into the room from the other side. And he's like, what the fuck is this? And then he realizes that there's cameras set up too with audio devices. And so he ends up contacting headquarters. But while he's looking in each of the rooms, he's realizing that each of the other guests are doing some weird shit. And the one that he's the most concerned about is room seven with Emily, because Emily has her sister Rose tied up and in a chair. And he doesn't understand the situation. He doesn't know that Emily's trying to save her sister. He just thinks it's a kidnapping. When he goes and he talks to the FBI director, the director said, your main objective is the surveillance equipment, all the intel you can possibly get, leave that other shit alone. And he's like, okay, but what about, and then the director cuts him off. I don't want to repeat myself. Leave that other shit alone. I repeat, do not interfere. He says, okay, but then he interferes. And so he goes over. and tries to help Rose, not knowing the situation. And then that's when it sort of flashes. It says room 7, the screen goes black, and it says room 7, and it sort of flashes back, and it lets you know that Emily and Rose did have a mother growing up, or at least they didn't show the mother, and it showed the father abusing the older sister Emily. And it sort of alludes that there's also sexual like abuse involved as well. And so you have both women who either hate powerful men or are completely head over heels in love with powerful men, which is Rose. She's in love with Billy Lee, who is the cult leader played by Chris Hemsworth, the hippie dude that doesn't wear shoes, because he never wears shoes in like the entire film. I don't think he wore shoes once. But anyway, that's not the point. I'll get to him later. And so when the cop breaks the door down and whacks Rose across the I'm sorry, Emily across the face and goes over to untie Rose, Emily pulls a buckshot out. Now, while this is all going on, you have the priest who ended up waking up Miles and says, "Hey, wake the fuck up. I need to find something. Where's the master key?" The detective still has it. He didn't bother to put the shit back. And so he's freaking out and he's, wait, what the fuck? If someone has the master key, then he starts going into the tunnels, investigating, and the father's following behind him, like, what the fuck is this? And realizes, yo, you're watching us. And he goes and explains, the Miles explains to the priest, fake priest, that, hey, I only watch who they ask me to watch. Priest asks who, he says upper management or higher management or whatever. And one thing that irked me, upper management never called and they never explained who upper management was. Just upper management. And they have a P.O. box where he delivers all the information uh, in Pennsylvania or somewhere. That's all you hear about upper management. Now, so when they're walking in the tunnels, the priest and Miles, they finally get to the room with Rose, Emily, and the cop. And the cop is being held at gunpoint by Rose. You have the pastor that takes off running and is like, "Yo, we gotta stop this. We gotta see what's going on. Whatever, yada yada yada." But then you have Miles like, "Oh my God, she's pointing the gun!" And you see the pastor, who's not really a pastor, is like, "Get away from the window!" Pa. So Emily ended up shooting the cop, and it went through the cop and it hit Miles across the face. Now, so the cop took the brunt of it, of course, dead. He's like instantly dead. Buckshot through the stomach, gone. And so you've got Miles, like his left side of his face got like grazed and it's all fucked up. But his eye surprisingly intact. Like there's cuts here, there's cuts here, here all over, but his eye's perfectly fine. Whatever. In a perfect world, everyone. I digress again. So when that happens, you have Rose that it's untied, and you've got the pastor who's walking around like, oh shit, do I go help him? Do I not help him? He chooses not to help him. He goes and he takes off running and he finds Darlene. And Darlene had already whacked the pastor over the head because the pastor, who wasn't a pastor, was looking for money that was buried in either room 4 or 5, and he didn't know which one because he developed Alzheimer's. So let's talk about his story. They don't really talk. They don't really say his name. If they do, I didn't remember it because it was like either one time or very like non. It's not important because the entire time he goes by Pastor Flynn or Father Flynn. And so turns out he's a bank robber. He explains all this to Darlene because Darlene, like I said, hit him over the head with a wine bottle and starts explaining, why he was trying to essentially roofie her. And he goes and explains, my brother was here 10 years ago. He buried money in one of the floors in here. It was either in room 4 or 5. He forgot which one because he developed Alzheimer's and or dementia, and he just needs to get the money back because that's all he has of his brother. That's all he has. That's his pretty much his legacy. And so Darlene's like, I don't believe you. I don't know what you're up to, but I know some freaky shit's happening because some stuff's going on, and like she can't find anybody. She heard gunshots, yada yada yada. So they have a little talk. She's like, you know what? I'm gonna choose to believe you. I've got a gun. She has the inspector's gun because whenever Emily shot the inspector, she went into the tunnel behind the room and went to go check on Miles. And when that happened, you had Rosie contact the cult leader and tell the cult leader where they all were. If you're confused right now, it's because this movie, I'm not going to say it's hard to follow, but it jumps around a lot. And so it shows the same scene every once in a while from a different person's perspective because everyone is watching everyone. And so right now I feel like I'm jumbling everything up. So if you're confused right now, I do apologize. But all I can say is watch the movie. What it boils down to is the cult leader shows up, and I feel like he's the only true bad guy of the film, and because his motive is simply because he wants to be beloved and he wants to be powerful. And Darlene sniffs that shit out real quick, and so she's like, I know what you're gonna say. I've met people like you. I know what you're about, and I don't really give a fuck." And she doesn't really give a fuck, and so the cult leader has everyone tied up. He kills Emily for taking Rosie, and is about to kill Miles, about to kill Darlene, about to kill Father Flynn when somehow I forgot how it happened. Father Flynn gets free, starts and like this is Jeff Bridges playing an old character but developing dementia and Alzheimer's, fighting Chris Hemsworth and winning. Don't know how that happened. Maybe he's all looks with a lot of muscle, but can't use them. But you have the other cult leaders that showed up, all five of them. I mean, the cult that they showed in the flashback was like 100 strong, easy, but he only chose to bring five people along. Actually, I'm sorry, he brought four along, and then there's also Rosie. So Rosie's the fifth person. And they're watching him get his ass beaten. He's like, you know what? I think we should help. And then you have Miles and Darlene who are still tied up on the ground, but a gun gets dropped close to Miles, who's still fucked up from getting shot in the face with the buckshot, but he ends up saving the day. Turns out that Miles was a Vietnam vet, and anyone who knows anything about the Vietnam War, about how the veterans were treated once they got back, they know that they weren't treated well. And so that's why upper management chose Miles to run the hotel in the first place because he wasn't psychologically stable, suffering some major PSD. Is it PSD? Post traumatic PS Post? Oh, PTSD. There we go. Acronyms, y'all. Anyway, suffering from some very strong PTSD because when they did his flashback, that shit was dark, y'all. Like bodies everywhere, bodies just everywhere. Him shooting people in the face and people shooting in the heart. He was just a sniper taking people out, and so he ends up saving the day, but he doesn't kill kids. So when Rosie, who's actually like 13 or 14, he ends up killing Billy Lee, the cult leader. Rosie takes it like really really hard, and so she's crying, but I don't think Miles understands why she's crying. She's crying because Billy Lee was everything to her. She saw Billy Lee kill her sister Emily, and Rose felt nothing. He's like, "Oh, my sister just got killed, but Billy Lee killed her, so that's fine." And so when Rosie's crying, you've got Miles thinking that, you know, she's crying because of the sister. Nah. He goes to hug her and that bitch has a knife and fucking eviscerated him. Took the knife, stab, drag until he pushed her away. But no, his guts were about to spill out. Like it was gross, y'all. And you have the pastor pick up a gun and shot that bitch in the face. Like, yo, you're 14, but you know what? You're fucked up. Like, there's no saving her. And so, yeah, she died. She did. But then again, so was Miles. So at the end of the film, you only have Darlene and the pastor who are alive, but then you've got the pastor who Alzheimer's dementia. I mean, there's still no cure for back in the like 60s. They really didn't know how to talk about it or know what to say, and so he was eventually going to die anyway. They split the money. She ends up going to Reno to sing, and when it's time for her to sing, her audience is they just don't give a fuck, y'all. But she doesn't care. She's not singing because she has to. She's singing because she loves it. And side note, I said this in my other video. It took like 5 minutes, but praise to the actress Cynthia Erivo. I'm not sure if that I'm saying that right, but she did some covers for this film, y'all. She sang live, and that shit was phenomenal. I love me some Beyonce. I love me some Lady Gaga, but the way she was singing those songs, y'all, it was so good. Some of them were sad. It made you want to cry. Like it made you want to cry. But anyway, that's my very confusing review of Bad Times at the El Royale. And let me go ahead and like talk about that real quick. The title's kind of fucked up because it should be Bad Times at El Royale, not the El Royale, because L and the are the same word in two different languages. So it's like Bad Times at the Royale or Bad Times at El Royale. Semantics, words, languages. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't. But yeah. Anyway, my rating for this film, I personally, since I love psychology, I like psychological thrillers, I like being able to follow something and have it pay off. Though the final act did bring the film down, that's to be expected in 2018. There's no good film, or should I say, there's no film out there that has a good final act, in my opinion, from the most recent 5 years. The final acts have just been piss poor. But anyway, back to the rating. I give it a B minus, about an 83%, which is a lot higher than the critics and the audience score. But you can't please everybody, y'all. Anyway, this is King Kyrie signing off. I'm about to make another video. If you want to peep that, peep that. If not, make today a wonderful day. Peace out for now, y'all.